So cheating is anti-economical. By trying to double spend or create an invalid block, all honest networks node will reject it, and the dishonest miner still burned massive amount of real electricity and precious hardware for nothing. The longest chain rule coordinates everybody. Therefore, the most accumulated proof of work wins. Every miner has a strong incentive to build on the chain everyone else is building on. Every security guarantee in Bitcoin ultimately comes down to real-world cost: electricity, hardware, and Bitcoin itself. Proof of work forces participants to put real resources at risk. That is why the network has never suffered a protocol-level hack in its entire history. And considering the exponential trajectory of the hash rate, every day passing makes more complicated to malevolent actors to overtake Bitcoin.
Hello, everyone, and here we are again. We are going to discuss about Bitcoin, about what is happening in the world. Here I am with Immortal. How are you doing?
Hello, good morning, guys, for all Asia.
Yes.
Here from Bangkok, I'm Marco from Indonesia. We're going to talk about
Bitcoin. On the other side is Marco. How are you doing, Marco?
Hi guys, happy to see you again. I'm doing great and excited to be here again to discuss about Bitcoin and also a bit of what's happening in real life with the situation in Iran that was a bit buzzy and it creates a lot of noise around Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, and finally having the distinction between the two coming more clear on the mainstream media. So happy to go deeper into those topics.
Excellent. So Bitcoin seems to be back, right? 73 and steady.
Yeah, especially over the last week. If we go on the chart on the last week, it seems that the trend of the consolidation might be broken. It's still very short-term time frame, so it's too early to have a final conclusion, but it seems that the momentum might be back.
Actually, you were checking on YouTube a few hours ago. Bitcoin is up 7% in April. We have new players on the market, like the Morgan Stanley ETF, Stretch accumulating. But what are we going to talk today, Marco? What are you bringing to us?
Yeah, let me share the screen, and I would love to discuss with you my latest article. That people, if are interested, they can find me on, and they can find it on my X at Battistoshi 93 on the article section. I think was pretty compelling, mainly because of also, again, as I started saying before, with the actual situation in Iran and the Strait of Hormuz, in which apparently many sources confirm that the Iran regime want to be paid a toll, but to be paid in Bitcoin and Bitcoin only, because they understood that Bitcoin is actually the only token that has no issuer, no central authority, and there is nobody that can at some point freeze your asset or block your funds. Whereas if they would have selected USDT or any other stablecoin or any other token, the likelihood that someone, in this case could be the US government, can freeze or block would be much, much higher. The point of the article is that Bitcoin itself and Satoshi, what Satoshi created, is actually a perfect machine that remove altruism from the equation and remove the need of trust that is very typical in human behaviors and in society in general. And he solved it by creating incentive, and those incentive kind of give the reward to only honest people following the rules without breaking them, because the cost of breaking the rules are much higher than following them. And so there is this alignment of incentives between all the players around the Bitcoin ecosystem, and actually greed and honesty are treated on the same way. And I think it's something unique on Bitcoin and how Bitcoin has been designed. So that's more or less the core topic of the article.
Yeah, this is something typical in Bitcoin. It's a good characteristic that it has, because in the fiat world, sometimes it's much better do the thing wrongs, or do the cost of doing thing wrong is lower than the cost of doing things right. On the Bitcoin side, the cost of doing things wrong is always much higher than doing things right. It shows when you want to do a 51% attack. If you want to revert a transaction or send a fake transaction, you must spend billions of dollars in energy and hardware. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think the whole point that all Bitcoiner knows very well is the mantra "Don't trust, verify." And again, it's the key essence of Bitcoin. You don't have to trust the central authority because there is no one, and you don't have to trust anybody on the network. You just need to run the node. You just need to ensure that the computer is running, the computer is following the protocol rules. And again, the beauty of Bitcoin is that if you try to go against and revert the rule, as you said, Fernando, the cost is unbearable. The cost, especially in today's Bitcoin economics, is completely gigantic, and it's a waste of time, waste of massive energy. And again, when people say yes, but Bitcoin can be still attacked, or maybe in the future with quantum, etc., we go back to the same point. The amount of hardware, the amount of energy, and the amount also of cost that you overall need to gather first and then use is completely uneconomical, because again, the other honest nodes will reject any double spending, will reject any kind of 51% attack, and the honest nodes will remain on the longest chain, which is the one started on January 3rd, 2009. So that's why Bitcoin is different, and that's why Bitcoin is superior. Whereas if you go on the proof of stake, the economics can be falsified much easier, because if an entity can accumulate the large majority of a token and then enforce a change in the protocol, you don't have this economical cost and energy related that can punish them, and so maybe they would be able to do any kind of reversal on the chain in the proof of stake. So again, Bitcoin is unique. Don't trust, verify. And I think actually might be also useful for the audience just to remember that the incentives on Bitcoin is that each component of the ecosystem, so the miners, the nodes, the node run, and their users, they all want the same thing: that Bitcoin survive, that Bitcoin keeps operational to function, and that there is no choke point or nothing that can break down, because each one of those entities have interest that Bitcoin price go up in time, and that the core functionality of Bitcoin keeps running. So again, to falsify the chain or to break it, especially today, I would say I would put a probability of 0%. In the early days, this probability might be much higher, but with time and with the scaling of the network and with the accumulation of capital, accumulation of users, increase of nodes, and the hash rate going higher, the likelihood of breaking and hacking Bitcoin is actually 0.
Yes, especially with the increasing hash rate that we are seeing, even though now miners are some of them pivoting to AI, but
The
of
public,
course
the public listed, yeah.
Yeah, the probability of an attack to Bitcoin is nothing is 0, but let's say 0.000000001, something like that.
Yeah, it's correct. And again, I think time it's in our favor, because as we see for the first 17 years, if we see the chart in logarithmic scale, if you see the not only about the price, but also about the hash rate, about the expansion of wallets, the number of nodes, we see that every cycle and every years, those numbers keep increasing, testifying that Bitcoin is actually spreading, that the global adoption of Bitcoin is increasing. Of course, we are not reached already the 8 billion people, and not everybody is on a Bitcoin standard, not everybody is using Bitcoin as money, all those topics, but it's a gradual process. We cannot expect that we go from nothing to 8 billion people in 10 years. It would be kind of silly to think. But if we see the trajectories, it's pretty obvious that that from the epoch, the first epoch of Satoshi to today, Bitcoin is much more resilient, and the whole basic functionality never stopped. And actually, the game is fair. It's a fair game since inception. That's for me another differentiation between Bitcoin and crypto, because other token, they had pre-mine, they had allocation from the founding team, they had advantage over the control of the protocol. So even if they claim that they are decentralized, are they really? Maybe they are decentralized in some sense, yes, but not even close compared to the decentralization and the resilience of the Bitcoin network.
No, all of them are 100% centralized because they depend on foundations, they depend on companies. You can see on XRP, that is the Ripple Foundation, Ethereum, the Ethereum Foundation, Solana, I don't know if it has Solana Foundation or
But
something.
the thing is, decentralization through the nodes, I think, is more important. And in that sense, for example, just to play devil's advocate, Solana, out of all the other cryptos, is the less centralized compared to Bitcoin. Obviously, the comparison is a little bit unfair because we are saying that obviously Bitcoin is the only one that fulfill this requirement. But someone from Solana might come and say, well, but we are more decentralized than HSBC.
Of course.
Right? So still crypto have some of the projects, very few, have some kind of usefulness. And they might argue, well, we are somehow decentralized. Obviously, nothing compares to the decentralization level of Bitcoin. That's out of the discussion. One thing is Bitcoin, the other thing is crypto, no comparison. That's why we treat Bitcoin as the top level, and then we still give some value to some networks, not the tokens itself, but some networks that have some functionality and some kind of decentralization, some level of decentralization that is not total, but is much better than the current fiat system.
Let me put in words the same words that Safdin said when he was discussing with Peter Schiff. He said, I am a Bitcoiner. I don't like gold, but I hate fiat more. So that's the point. I am a Bitcoiner. I hate any other thing that is not Bitcoin, period. But if you come with a shitcoin that has a chain that can take money out of, that can make war against the legacy system and can help us to process transactions better and more decentralized than the fiat world, I will support it, at least in the transition.
But one thing that it cannot be forgotten is how important is the proof of work concept. In fact, when the systems start trying to copy Bitcoin, most of them were on a proof of work basis, including Ethereum. At some point along the way, the centralized aspect of that shitcoin, Ethereum, suggested that proof of work is not the best because we are consuming too much energy. Totally wrong view of the world, because they were trapped by the narrative at the time, which was during the time of COVID, wokeism, trying to control things. They switch to this proof of stake, which is a big mistake. And then most of the other Bitcoins, not most, but some of them also move into this system, proof of stake, or some of the variations of someone call it proof of time, or I don't know what. Point is, they forgot the number one feature, which is the proof of work. You cannot avoid that, because otherwise you will break all the changes of incentives. That thing that you, Marco, were talking about at the beginning, that it's you get punished if you don't play along. So, right? But on a proof of stake system, that can be washed out by those who control the network. And regarding the adoption thing that you were also mentioning, that we cannot reach 8 billion people in 15 years, that is one of the criticisms. Some people say, well, but Bitcoin is already 15, 17 years, whatever it is. And how can you say that we are early? Well, because actually everything in nature has a path that is not that quick in anything. And Bitcoin is just following a network growth pattern like the Metcalfe law and the Power Law, which is very precisely mathematically described. So we will not reach 8 billion people for sure. Not now, not next year, not in 1 decade, not in 2 decades. Probably we will never reach 8 billion people. That's not the point. The point is how can we make Bitcoin rich, get big enough as to compete with the biggest assets in the world.
Yeah, that's the point. Not to reach 8 billion people who use Bitcoin in a conscious way, that they are like paying Bitcoin with the wallet of Satoshi or any Lightning wallet, but 8 billion or all population of the world using Bitcoin in any kind of way. For example, in Africa, the Africans village will use Bitcoin as a tool of payment. But in the rest of the world, or probably in the first world countries, people will be exposed to Bitcoin without them using Bitcoin as a payment method. For example, as money into the pension funds, as money into the insurance funds, as some kind of reserve of value or of anywhere. So that's, I think, is the main goal. And let me point this about what Diego said. Yeah, of course, everything takes time, but the good thing is that, as Hal Finney said, every time that goes by and Bitcoin hasn't crashed because of technology or some kind of regulations, is more data into the market that justifies a better price, a bigger price. So every time that Bitcoin is around us, is getting bigger and bigger and more resilient and more are stronger. So and more difficult to destruct. So that's the point.
Yeah, I totally agree. And yeah, back to what Diego said about the 8 billion people adoption that might take even longer than us Bitcoiner would love to see. I think is normal because again, Bitcoin is not only a new technology, it's also an asset, and so it also involves money. It also involves financial decision. It's not like saying yes, internet moved on an S curve. So in the 1970s, only the military and university has internet. Then in 1990s, the early adopter, and now in 20 years, everybody on the planet has internet. Yes, it's true, but there is no monetary component into it. And a lot of people are sometimes blocked, or it's much more complicated to understand a network, which is also an asset. And that's the unique property of Bitcoin. So those S-curve adoption that might be familiar with people on other technologies, probably with Bitcoin, it would take much more time because, again, it involves money, it involves savings, it involves all economical and financial decision-making from everybody. And it's a much more complex thing to reach.
Yes, but let me point one thing. Now everyone uses internet, but which percentage of the people who uses internet understand how does internet work? That's the point. People use internet because internet became useful for them, not because
and also
they
very
like
easy,
internet.
very easy to use. Yeah,
I remember when was the explosion of WhatsApp. Why everyone started using WhatsApp? Because they like? No, because you can avoid paying money for SMS. So what's a way to send free SMS, let's say, because you pay a flat fee that was your internet connection, and you can send as many message as you want. While with the SMS, you pay per SMS. With Bitcoin, it's going to be the same. People will adopt it, or not people, institutions probably will adopt it when they understand or when they view that it solves a problem that they have better than the solution that they have now.
Also, to put things in perspective, when you guys say everybody have internet, that's not true, right? There is, I just double check it, but it's around 5 to 6 billion people, which means not even the internet can reach the 8 billion people. So why could Bitcoin reach 8 billion people, right? So
Yeah,
internet
totally true. Yeah.
took it how long? 30, 50 years to reach 67% of the planet. Bitcoin in 15 years to how much is it? One
Five, less than 5%.
less than 5%. So it might take literally another 2 decades to probably reach 15, 20%.
I
So
agree.
it's a long walk ahead for Bitcoiners.
Yeah, I think what we should work on, and hopefully the majority of people that already understood Bitcoin over the next decade will increase much more their total allocation to Bitcoin compared to their disposable assets. Because today, yeah, maybe we can say it's 5% of the global population, but maybe those 5% on average just convert, I don't know, 10% or maybe 5% of their net worth into Bitcoin. Not all of those 5% are Bitcoin maximalists, like it's a very few amount of people. So we can scale on the percentage of global adoption, but we can also scale a lot on the people already understanding Bitcoin and deciding to go much, much deeper into it. So I think Bitcoin can literally grow by exponential times just because of those two factors. We don't need to reach 8 billion people. We just need to reach maybe 10, 15% of global adoption, and the user on average have a larger stack on Bitcoin themselves. And then maybe after we can reach maybe, the 20, the 30, the 50%, and hopefully in the future, it will be similar to the internet, but it's a much longer and more complex progress. Yeah.
Especially what we must work, and this is something that Saylor understood, is to what this Saylor is doing, try to convince the finance world, the big capital, the people who has a lot of money, to put into Bitcoin. The ETF, treasury companies, all these instruments. Because if we try to convince the woman that is selling in the corner bubble tea here in Thailand to accept Bitcoin, and to convince every customer that the woman have every day to pay with Bitcoin, it's going to be impossible. And even though if we could convince the woman to accept Bitcoin and the 50 clients that she has every day to pay with Bitcoin, it was be like a short movement, and it's not going to impact. But if we can convince the insurance companies, the finance world, to create instruments that can bring fiat and turn into Bitcoin, the adoption, I want the adoption of the Bitcoinization is going to be much faster. And we don't need a person who say, okay, I will adopt Bitcoin as I will save in Bitcoin, because probably this person, the account manager or the asset manager of that this person trusts, says, I have this ETF that is doing good. And probably this ETF is an ETF that includes a stretch that is indirectly connected with Bitcoin. And the person is investing money on Bitcoin without knowing that they are putting money on Bitcoin. I think that is the main challenge now. The education of the financial institutions making Bitcoin as the Trojan horse.
Yeah, great point. And I think the more, the better. So if we have like the strategy using creating stretch and infiltrating the money market, infiltrating the fixed income, infiltrating Wall Street, Then you have Block that with the update of their own terminal allowed 4 million merchants in the US to accept Bitcoin. Then we have education on retail. Then you can have. So again, I think we have so many different paths, and all of them contributes by their own to the hyper-Bitcoinization, which again, for me, it's happening, but it's not happening at the fast pace that might some people on X wish to happen. So we will never see, I think, on Bitcoin this S curve in which we move from 10% adoption to 80% adoption in 5 years. It will be much more gradual, but it will monetize, it will raise the floor on the price, it will dampen the volatility, will be easier to understand by many people because you don't have even to understand maybe the technical foundation on Bitcoin because of Stretch and because of other instrument. And that's for me hyper-Bitcoinization. It's just more gradual. It's not we wake up tomorrow with 1 million Bitcoin. I think it's naive to think.
Let me put a correction on that. Bitcoin is growing at the pace it has to grow because it's a living organism. This is what your the guy from your country, Giovanni, explained on the Power Law. If Bitcoin would grow at the pace that Bitcoin Twitter wants it to grow, probably it will crash because the exponential growth will lead to the crash. But as Bitcoin is growing at the pace that is growing with the Power Law, following the Power Law, it made it more resilient and more powerful. That's the point.
What he explained is that most exponential growth things reach a point of collapse. And you can see with some recent examples, for example, OpenAI ChatGPT. It grew exponentially for a month or 2 or 3 or 1 year, or whatever it was. And now right now you're seeing the collapse of that exponential growth. So it's much better for Bitcoin that we keep growing on a power law trajectory and not in an exponential trajectory. But regarding the S curve that might change in the future, the power law trajectory, I think that might happen when the market cap of Bitcoin reaches the level of gold or the level of money in the world. Somewhere around 30 to 100 trillion market cap. At that point, the power law might turn into an S curve. And now everybody sees so obvious that Bitcoin is all over the financial system, is so overwhelmingly all over the place, that now the merchant, the bubble tea lady, gets into the FOMO mode. Why I'm not using this? But it's not the other. That's what we usually would discuss, that the wrong approach for Bitcoiners is try to impose this from the bottom up, when it's going to happen from the top to the bottom.
Yeah, and that's what we need to do. Hats off to Michael Saylor, because he understood this and he started preaching this. And in 2020, he was a crazy guy being treated like crazy. And now we have how many Bitcoin treasury companies? And they own more than 1 million Bitcoin. We have the ETF, BlackRock ETF. We have Morgan Stanley this week. So more institutional adoption coming. So I think that this is the way to make hyper-Bitcoinization faster. On the other side, we need to keep giving the battle, educating people, telling them that fiat system is a scam, and the Bitcoin is the escape of this scam. But again, convincing 2 of your friends on your side, 3 of our friends here, is not gonna get Bitcoin to 30 trillion or 100 trillion market cap.
Yeah, but it's happening. Because again, I always see, like, if we go back in history, if we are like back in 476 in Rome, majority of Roman people wouldn't expect that Rome would collapse in few. I mean, especially the historian would say that the end of the Roman Empire was in that specific year, because maybe they were enjoying their own life in Rome, in some place nearby. But again, if you see the overall picture, you see that the transition was real. If you just get stuck in a specific moment in time, it's much more complex to see. So for me, Bitcoin is the same. The hyper-Bitcoinization is happening. It's not happening that there is one day that someone claims it's official. It is a gradual operation, and that every day you see some new information, like what you just said, Fernando. I mean, we had from one company to 200 public company having Bitcoin in 5 years. We moved from no ETF in February 2024 to more than 1 million token in the US ETF alone. And now we have Morgan Stanley with buying, 500 Bitcoin per day. We moved from 1 node to 22,000 node or more. So this thing is happening. It's just nobody will say the hyper-Bitcoinization happened. It's happening, and it's up to everybody to realize it, to study it, to take responsibility, and to join. So, yeah, great conversation. And maybe before passing to the last point, I will just maybe to read this passage just for clarifying why cheating is impossible, basically, on Bitcoin, because it's anti-economical. So cheating is anti-economical. By trying to double spend or create an invalid block, all honest networks node will reject it, and the dishonest miner still burned massive amount of real electricity and precious hardware for nothing. The longest chain rule coordinates everybody. Therefore, the most accumulated proof of work wins. Every miner has a strong incentive to build on the chain everyone else is building on. Every security guarantee in Bitcoin ultimately comes down to real-world cost: electricity, hardware, and Bitcoin itself. Proof of work forces participants to put real resources at risk. That is why the network has never suffered a protocol-level hack in its entire history. And considering the exponential trajectory of the hash rate, every day passing makes more complicated to malevolent actors to overtake Bitcoin. So I think that's more or less the summary on why today, after 17 years, is almost impossible. Okay, I agree. It's not 0%, but it's 0.1%. And it's because it's anti-economical. There is no rational actors that can at this price, because you need also to amass millions of ASICs. Who's going to produce the physical hardware to send it to you? You have these physical boundaries on every layer of Bitcoin that protects it.
Also, let me add one little caveat there, which is why good when the incentive Bitcoin is not yet big enough, it's not important enough as to spend all that energy, time, money to be attacked, which is the same fact created through the quantum fact, right? They try to impose what quantum can do. Oh, they can have Bitcoin. Why good? How are we so important yet? We are only 1.5 trillion. You have so many other things way easier to attack than that.
And
So
probably
this
more
is-
valuable as well, as of today, yeah.
And as
Right.
you said, even though I want to attack Bitcoin and I want to hack Bitcoin, it's like having a honeypot and put the shit on that.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. If I had the quantum computer, I would hack the HSBC network, steal all the money, and buy Bitcoin.
the whole system in Bitcoin is so perfect that it's just like game theory, right? Every time you try to take a shortcut or bypass or hack it, you crash against a wall that doesn't allow you to move forward. So it has intrinsically all these self-incentivized mechanism to not be self-destroyed by itself.
But that's the good point. Why this wall doesn't allow to move forward? Because some central authority says that you cannot move forward? No, because the reward of jumping that wall is less than doing the things correctly. That's the magic. The reward that you have by doing the things right is much bigger than the reward of doing things wrong. That's the good
Let me
point.
put a ridiculous example with nature. What happened with the iguana? What is this animal that they can drop the tail because the tail grow back?
I think lizards as well. Yeah.
So it's lizard. So it's the same. Imagine that your fingers can grow every time, and then eventually you don't like your finger, you cut it because you know it's gonna grow back. It's like printing.
Mhm.
So you don't cut your finger because you know it's never coming back. Same
Yeah.
happen with Bitcoin. You cannot damage it because you will self-destroy yourself again. So that's why it looks more like a living organism in that sense. Nothing that looks like a vector of attack is actually effective. All the opposite.
Uh-huh.
It just works as a defensive mechanism all the time in every aspect that you can throw a vector of attack on Bitcoin.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
and that is the point, because in economics, in our life, not only in economics, everything is moved by incentives, and every decision you make, you put in a balance, like in a scale, the reward and the investment. If your reward is bigger than your investment, you take the risk. So that's, I compare with the crime. Why the countries with the more permissive laws for crime are the countries that have the biggest crime rates? Because a criminal can go and the punishment is not hard. But the countries like El Salvador, why El Salvador dropped the crime rate? Because if you commit a crime, you go all your life in prison. And that's the thing. And Bitcoin is the same. You cannot commit crime. You cannot, because if you attack Bitcoin, everyone loses, including you.
There was another example from that Korean company a few weeks ago who, by mistake, sent some, I don't remember if it was Bitcoin or any other crypto, to the wrong address. Now, yesterday, the news was that now they are claiming to the court to find a way to get it back.
Good luck.
Good luck if
luck,
it's on Bitcoin.
right?
Good luck.
So
Yeah.
that's why on Bitcoin, you cannot afford these mistakes.
Right.
Because it's irreversible, and that's one of the main features. But at the same time, also which that part that we value as a very important feature for Bitcoin, we also have to acknowledge that for the rest of the world is a negative feature. Grandma still wants to call the bank if she made the wrong transaction and get the money back.
Mhm.
So we still gonna be fighting between this true hardcore, take your own responsibility, keep your keywords safe,
Mhm.
versus the rest of the world actually do not value that, at least
No,
yet.
actually, they said this too burdensome. It's too complicated for them because 24 word. Oh my god, I need to remember this very long password. It's too risky, so I prefer my bank. So we are still in this mindset that for the traditional person, it's much better to have money in the bank because, as you said, if I do a wrong wire, I can call the bank and I can reverse it. If someone steal my card, I can freeze it and then they can work on reversal because, as we know, the finality on the traditional banking system is much longer than the one on Bitcoin. Bitcoin is completely the opposite, but for the majority of people, it's still too much to bear, and that's why they don't want it. And it's, to me, it's insane, but that's the reality.
Yeah, but on the other side, now again, that's why we need other instruments like the ETF. Okay, you don't want to hold your keys.
Yeah.
You're not going to have Bitcoin, but you can get exposed to Bitcoin. Go to BlackRock. If you lose your password on your investment account, you can request another back, and you still have your Bitcoin there.
Yeah. So yeah, I think we already touched with Diego saying that Bitcoin is the expression of game theory. So my last part of the article is that Bitcoin and the Nash equilibrium, which again it's very common knowledge for Bitcoiner to know this concept. But the whole idea is that Bitcoin cannot punish bad behaviors. So in real life, as we said and we touched before, if we do a crime and the police caught us, we need to go to a trial and you might have a fine and maybe you can go in jail or you have a punishment, a real punishment. But in cyberspace, before Bitcoin, it was almost impossible to enforce this kind of punishment. And again, introducing proof of work and introducing the alignment of incentives, Bitcoin is the best expression of the Nash equilibrium. So that basically is this kind of realization that when you have a system in which all the participants needs to take the decision in their own interest and putting their own interest at first, then the whole rules of the game are clear, and the rules of the game are clear, and then normally it came out the best outcome possible because everybody is driven by their own self-interest first. And Bitcoin enforces it with protocol, with math, and with rules, and with proof of work at the base. So if we simply put this information on a table, and we see the buy and not buy, and we see that Bitcoin is true for is very important for individual and also for companies. It should also theoretically be good for nation state. The whole metrics tell us that the best outcome is the block number 4, in which both A and B become early adopter, even though by becoming early adopter, you give up the monopoly on money. Because if a nation state will be the last adopter on Bitcoin, let's say in 50 years, only the last country on earth decide to enter the Bitcoin standard, of course, you are the much worse situation compared to yourself adopting Bitcoin 20 or 30 years before. So even if you need to give up, in this case, the monopoly on money, the incentives and how the Nash equilibrium might play out is that it's a sacrifice that you need to make in order to don't lose the race. And so the becoming an early adopter is critical for individual, is critical for company, and it will be critical also for nations. And we might already see with El Salvador. El Salvador is better 5 years into the Bitcoin standard rather than what it was in 2020. Bhutan probably is better today rather than 3-4 years ago, prior to the starting to accumulate and using geothermal energy for their own accumulation strategy. Again, we have more than 200 nations on the planet. The last one would probably be the worst in a very worse situation rather than El Salvador, because the game theory plays out exactly like this.
Yeah, the only problem with state adoption of Bitcoin, it's that in a democracy with the cycle of 4 years, there is the wrong incentive to think long term, which is what you need to implement this Bitcoin strategy. In the case of El Salvador, it just took one person, which is totally out of the norm. Bukele is not the traditional politician, right?
Yeah.
That was pretty clear. So it will take either one person with a totally different mindset to the traditional politician in every country, with the view of the goal of growing the country further than his own life. Same happened with Milei. A couple of times was caught saying this, because he was saying everything that we are trying to do now for Argentina, the fruits of this effort will be pick up in probably 40 or 50 years. And then the journalist will say, well, but everybody is going to be dead in 40, 50 years. That is exactly the point. When you can think further than your own life, that is required for the country leader to implement Bitcoin at the end of the day. Because if they are just incentivized by getting reelected in 4 years, then there is no incentive to adopt Bitcoin. But if they can see a long-term vision, then you could adopt first Bitcoin just for your country, not because you personally will have any benefit out of it.
Really on that.
Yeah, and I think it's a shed a light of positivity also for small countries. Because again, small countries are much easier to manage. Small countries can have probably less bureaucracy or less constraints. So potentially, if you have, as we said for El Salvador, like a decisive leader taking a long-term vision, this small country can act much faster, can go much quicker, can reshape themselves in a very short period of time, go back into an hard monetary standard, go back to long-term principle, reducing the exposition with the fiat system that is actually struggling them over time, and improve their own situation. And then maybe the neighbors of those countries will see what's happening there. Why in 5 years they have booming in tourism, they have more infrastructure, they have better GDP ratio and debt compared to us. So maybe it can start again in the long scheme of things. It's not happening overnight, but it can start a more empowering grace for the small countries that today are under the IMF control, are under the dollarization program, and they are not really, they don't have any decision actually. So sometimes for them might be the escape valve. Try Bitcoin, follow the Bukele example, follow what Bhutan is doing. And those are tiny countries that are much better today rather than 5 years ago. And hopefully many other might see inspiration from that.
That's the key point, being small, because when you're small, you can take the risk. Same happened with strategy in, right?
Yeah.
The first company that adopted Bitcoin in Wall Street was not Amazon, Meta, or Nvidia.
Yeah.
It was a company that it was a tiny company of 1 billion market
And struggling
cap.
by most measuring struggling. So
yeah, they've been fighting for years to compete with Microsoft, with no hope of winning that battle ever. So when you are against the wall with the sword in your neck, you have to take this decision that for the rest of the world might look risky, but actually Saylor took a very well thought decision. It might look risky, but it was a very well thought process on deciding on how to implement Bitcoin as a strategy. But he could do that because he didn't have to go and discuss with a board of directors that would delay the process for a couple of years, or even worse, in a country state where you have to move this into the Congress, then the other chamber of whatever it is, get approval maybe in 3 years. So that's why a small country with a strong leader as El Salvador could implement this right away. A small company without a silly board of directors can implement this right away. And they are the ones that took advantage of bigger, slow moving countries or systems where all of this get too much bureaucratic as to move fast enough.
Yeah. And that's why Bitcoin is a revolution, because it gives to the small, less equipped country or a small company, or also the single individual, the complete unknown person, to have potentially a great power on your side. And that's for me what's really Bitcoin. If I need to summarize, it's the why Bitcoin it's working, and it will work even more in the future, because it gives to everybody that try to fight the system, try to fight an industry, try to fight with their own company, and they keep struggling, the possibility of an alternative solution that might be obscure at first, might be complex at first to explain or to fully go into it. But if you have vision, and if you have courage, and if you have knowledge of what you're doing, and you do it properly, it's one of the best decision making you can have.
Yeah, it's a good quote to close. So anything else you want to discuss, Marco?
No, I think was nice conversation, and thank you guys for that.
What happened with the Iran thing?
Yeah, what happened with the Iran thing? What do you think? It's really true about that they are accepting Bitcoin, or it's like more bullshit?
I think someone did already some on-chain analysis, seeing on the blocks after this announcement if it's true that you can see some major transactions, considering, like Every day we have 3, 4, 5 ships containing oil. They've done some estimation on the number of oil, barrels of oil. And then if you see that they need to charge $1 per barrel of oil, they came out with some amount. Actually, if you go on the mempool, you can see that there are some, let's say, unusual, massive, very big Bitcoin transactions. But again, it's just speculation. We cannot prove it. It would be nice if I don't know the regime say, look, is our wallet, and every day you can track the ships. Probably it's we will never know by fact. But what is true is that only Bitcoin can be unseized and can be, and you remove the possibility of any foreign government to block it, because again they had massive amount of USDT, and the US with Tether froze the assets on Tether. So Bitcoin is not possible. You cannot call Satoshi. You cannot call any node runner and say, you know what, now freeze this wallet and revert to me. With USDC, with Circle, with XRP, with Ethereum, and all the other solutions, it's possible. You just call them and you can reverse it or you can freeze it. With Bitcoin, it's impossible.
I want to call USDT and USDC solutions. All the others are shitcoins.
On the Iran thing, I have 2 points. One, I still doubt that this can actually be implemented somehow. Imagine the situation. You're in the middle of a war in an area with high conflict, with rockets flying your head. Who is in charge of getting a Bitcoin wallet, stopping by the guy on the ship, telling them, hey, let me count how many barrels you have, and you send a Bitcoin transaction to this wallet? Who is that guy first? Who controls it? The amount of corruption that can be possible in that situation, in the middle of the war, trying to negotiate a kind of an illegal fee on ships passing by. So the implementation of the thing for me sounds very weird. I would still categorize it on the bullshit news until proven wrong. Second point is this?
But sorry, Diego, before going to the second point, I think it's true, by the way, that they are charging for per barrel of oil. I don't think it's so complicated, because I think that those big oil tanker needs to move from one place, passing there, they will stop. Probably they will have some checkings, I would assume. And I think it's easier to understand what's inside. I think it's pretty should be some level of transparency, because it's an international route, international trade. So I think each oil tanker should declare what they're bringing with them. Then again, the conversion on this is the amount of barrel of oil, and then you need to pay into this wallet. I agree, it's a different story. But to know what
wallet, right?
I don't know. It's like come alive with a towel on the head and say, scan this QR code.
Or instead of sending $1 per barrel, you can send 90 cents to this wallet and 10 cents to this wallet. It's just so much corruption can happen.
I agree. That's agree.
That is weird. But anyway, let's see with more information.
But
later.
For sure, they want to collect money, and for that reason, I think it's fair to assume that they will collect money. The point is, are they collecting dollars? Maybe they said first they want to collect yuan. But still, you have a lot of corruption. So maybe Bitcoin, if you say, yeah, this is the wallet, unless we see this amount, the ship won't move. You remove also the corruption, because as you said, if you have 1 million barrel, it's $1 million or the equivalent in yuan. Should I wire you those money? Should I bring the suitcase with money? I don't know. I think it's much easier to corrupt a suitcase of money or to steal half of it rather than a QR code. That might seem stupid, but
but on the other hand, I would say, if let's say my fee, for the fee, you have this bank account from the government. It's a government bank account. You transfer the money there. That's kind of clear. You get an invoice. You transfer the money to the government. In the case of a Bitcoin wallet, how do you know that wallet belongs to the government?
Yeah, I think in the Strait of Hormuz there is military from Iran saying if you don't pay to either dollars, either yuan or Bitcoin, the ship is not moving. Otherwise, we bomb it. I don't know. I think they are pretty. I think they are much smarter than what the U.S. Western propaganda want to tell us.
Anyways, what you
Yeah.
can see,
So,
either a bullshit or no bullshit, you can see that this is another victory for Bitcoin, right?
but
Because
that brings me to the second point. Is it a victory
Yeah.
or it's a negative news? Because now,
Yeah, people might
well,
say, look, they use Bitcoin, so Bitcoin is for
right.
regime. Yeah,
And in the CNN news that your auntie, your grandma, your cousin in the JP Morgan watch, the
Yeah.
news is going to be terrorists are using Bitcoin
I agree.
to avoid this punishment. So for sure, it's going to be a negative news for the normies war. For the Bitcoin, as it looks like, you see, now we prove a case, but we are still talking to each other.
Yeah.
The bigger news is still going to be looked as terrorist money.
Yeah, maybe normie are so broke for the inflation, for the increase in for the inflation and the increase of the prices everywhere that they don't care about investing, they don't have much extra saving, or they don't want to touch Bitcoin because it's in a bear market. So maybe the price reacted positively also because normie are not really interested anymore. But yeah, I agree. It might be associated like in the past for the Russia sanctions. They say, yeah, you see, now they mine Bitcoin. You see, so Bitcoin is bad because it's used for avoiding sanctions. So I think it's a narrative that will be forever with us. Every time we have bad news, if Bitcoin is associated, some people want to tell you that it's bad, but the price actually reacting this way after a couple of months, I think is pretty positive.
let's see how it evolves.
Yeah.
Let's see. So, last question, Marco. We have an argument here with Diego regarding the Artemis mission. What do you think about the Artemis mission? It was true or was fake?
I don't know. I mean, I'm not really into it, so I think I don't have a complete, knowledge to give to the audience. What I can say, I think if you go watch the videos in 1969, for me that was fake 100%.
Yes, sir.
100%. If you see now with the eyes of someone that see videos every day and you see CGI, etc., you see that it's fake. This thing is fake. How they, they moved from the moon to come back, and you see the video. This video is fake 100%. I don't care what people say. Also, my dad is really into it. Say, no, we went to the moon in 1969. So, Dad, look this video now with the knowledge of how the world works and how the planet works, how things move in the space. This was fake 100% in 1969. And I think that's also why it's very complicated to go back to the moon, because we never been there.
Exactly. That's exactly my
Physical
point.
human beings, maybe they send something, some robot to put some, radar to do something, but the video in 1969, and I think also the video right after, in my view, is 100% fake.
The point is, in 1969, you do have the technology to send a rocket to the moon, but you do not have the technology to land on the moon. Same true 50, 60 years after. Today, we do have the technology to go around the moon, which is probably what happened, but we still don't have the technology to land on the moon because it's a totally different technological challenge to go around and to land safely with human beings there. So my point is probably Artemis did go around the moon, but they will not land, and they will not land in probably 10 more years. And unless the only chance you got to actually land people on the moon, it would be from the hand of Elon Musk. He can do it. Not NASA. NASA was totally fake in 69, and it will be in the next year.
You know who think that we never went to the moon?
Mm-hmm.
The people of Bitcoin Green. So
yeah, Fernando, wait.
They are with all they have the bingo of conspiracy theories.
Yeah, again,
So,
just watch together this video. Wait,
some of them I support, Some of them, of course, not.
Let's see.
I get the pro. 99 proceeded. 3, 2, 1. Ignition. Right away, Houston. Vector good.
Guys, what is this?
Ag thought.
Come on, it cannot be real.
That's totally ridiculous.
I mean,
Anyways,
yeah, just this part for me is
One.
insane. You know, all this, what is this sparkling of blue? What is this?
but this video is fake. It's not the real one.
That's the one that they use to promote it.
No, I think this is one of the many videos. We have many videos. I'm not saying, but this one actually, I think it's real video on how this
Yeah,
machine
this is real.
deployed to come back. But again, I'm not an expert, but when I see this kind of video, I have some, some doubt in 1969.
Don't trust, verify.
Yes.
So,
We go
Marco,
back to the point. Yeah.
thank you very much for your time. I think that I see you next week talking about Bitcoin treasury companies.
Yeah.
I think that Saylor is going to announce a huge purchase and probably surpass BlackRock in Bitcoin holdings. But let's see what's happening. In the meantime, give us your social media so our audience
But
can.
wait, let's before that, let's end with the prediction. How many Bitcoin is going to announce Taylor on Monday?
Between 12 and 13K.
I read something that in one day they could have bought more than 5,000 only from Stretch. I would say between 10 to 12,000. I mean, it's 5 digit. I would say 5 digit. If it's
Then
more,
yes, I think from Stretch alone was somewhere around 8K.
Mhm.
But also, I don't know if you noticed yesterday, even though the price of Bitcoin was reacting positively, MSTR goes down, which means probably he overused the ATM also on MSTR, which make me think that maybe we go above 20K.
Would be amazing.
Let's see.
Yeah, could be.
Anyways.
Yeah, it will be an interesting Monday when Saylor will publish the usual post.
So Marco, again, tell us your social media so our audience can follow you.
Yeah, on X, Battistoshi 93, and yeah, please follow me, follow you guys, and I would love also to see more maybe questions from the audience if there are any topics they want to see, maybe some Q&A sessions, so maybe we can engage more. But mainly on X.
Excellent. Okay, thank you, Marco. Thank you, Mortal, and thank you very much to everyone who is on the side. If you like the episode, give us a like, subscribe to our channel, follow us on social media, because doing so, you help us a lot to paint the world orange. Share this episode with people you love. Share this episode with people you hate, because we must reach 8 billion people and give them the orange pill. Stay humble, stack sats, and remember, we are all Satoshi.